What if every Netflix villain, every manipulator, murderer, mastermind, and monster finally had to face justice? No cinematic fade-out, no poetic ambiguity, no, they got away because it's art. Just real-world consequences. Today, we're imagining a world where Netflix's most chilling villains are stripped of plot armor and forced to answer for their crimes. From Joe Goldberg's twisted love obsessions to the professor's moral manipulations in Money Heist, we're diving deep into what their punishments should have been and what it says about us that we often root for them. This is, what if Netflix villains faced real consequences? Let's start with Joe Goldberg from You. The man who calls himself a hopeless romantic, but is really a textbook psychopath with a thesaurus. Joe's charm works because it mirrors something disturbingly human, the fantasy of being seen and understood. But in the real world, Joe's crimes, stalking, kidnapping, murder, identity theft, would add up to multiple life sentences. He doesn't need a therapist. He needs a maximum security cell. Joe's obsession with control masquerades as love. If real consequences applied, he wouldn't be the misunderstood anti-hero. He'd be the cautionary tale on every true crime podcast. And yet, millions love Joe. That tells us more about us than him. We crave the fantasy of control, even if it comes from a monster. Next up, the professor from Money Heist. A man who rewrote the rules of crime with elegance and empathy. But here's the catch. If this were real life, he wouldn't be the clever Robin Hood. He'd be branded a domestic terrorist. Armed robbery, hostage-taking, and endangering hundreds of lives, that's not revolutionary justice. That's organized trauma. The professor's charisma blinds us. He represents what we want to believe, that rebellion can stay pure and crime can be noble. But imagine the aftermath. The victim's trauma, the political chaos, the lives destroyed in the name of a symbol. If real consequences applied, the professor wouldn't be a legend. He'd be a case study in moral delusion. Reginald Hargreaves, the cold genius who raised the Umbrella Academy, not as children, but as experiments. Let's be honest, in the real world, this is not tough love. It's child abuse wrapped in genius. If consequences were real, Hargreaves would face federal charges for psychological and physical abuse. Yet the show frames him as tragic, a man burdened by a cosmic mission. But that's how abuse often hides behind good intentions. His legacy isn't heroism, it's generational trauma. And in our world, he'd be remembered not as a father, but as a monster who called himself one. Kilgrave from Jessica Jones isn't just another charming villain. He's the embodiment of coercive control. His power to command others mirrors something chillingly real: emotional manipulation and gaslighting. He doesn't just control minds, he steals agency. If real-world justice applied, Kilgrave wouldn't just face a courtroom, he'd face a tribunal for crimes against humanity. But here's why he's terrifying. He forces us to question how much of our will we give away willingly, to charm, to love, to fear. When Jessica kills him, it's not just justice, it's freedom. And it's one of the few times Netflix actually lets a villain face the consequences he truly deserves. Then there's Tokyo and Berlin, the chaotic hearts of Money Heist. They're fan favorites because they own their rebellion. But look closer. They leave trails of death and heartbreak behind them. If real consequences applied, Berlin would die in disgrace, not as a martyr. Tokyo would be remembered as reckless, not romantic. They represent our obsession with glorified destruction, the idea that passion excuses pain. But in the real world, passion without accountability is just another weapon. Not all villains wear faces. Some come from the upside down. Vecna, the Mind Flayer. They're embodiments of trauma, grief, and buried pain. If real consequences applied here, it's not about punishment. It's about healing. Because when evil isn't human, the only way to fight it is to face what it represents inside us. And maybe that's the deepest consequence of all. And finally, let's talk about someone who doesn't think she's a villain at all. Wednesday Addams, the queen of gothic wit, the anti-hero of Nevermore Academy, and one of Netflix's most beloved icons. But here's the twist. If we stripped away the black humor and Addams' charm, would Wednesday's actions look heroic or horrifying? She shows classic villain traits: zero empathy for authority, obsession with death and suffering, a manipulative intellect that uses others as tools. In another context, Wednesday wouldn't be the quirky heroine. She'd be the origin story of a cult leader. That's not rebellion. That's the first step toward narcissistic detachment, the psychological hallmark of villainy. Yet we love her because she's honest about it. She doesn't hide her darkness. She owns it. Maybe that's why she works. Because while other Netflix villains hide behind excuses, Wednesday names her madness and turns it into power. If real consequences existed for her world, she might still walk free. Not because she's innocent, but because she's too self-aware to be caught. She's the villain evolution, not evil for chaos, but evil as self-expression. And that's scarier than anything in the Addams family crypt. So, if Netflix villains truly faced consequences, Joe would rot in prison, the professor would stand trial, Reginald would lose his empire, Kilgrave would face justice, Tokyo would fall, not rise, and Wednesday would smile through it all. Because real consequences aren't just about punishment. They're about recognition, recognizing the monster in others, and sometimes in ourselves. Maybe that's the real reason we can't stop watching these stories. Because somewhere deep down, we're not just afraid of villains. We relate to them.